The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Isabella Ramirez wiped down tables at Sonny's diner, her calloused hands moving mechanically across the sticky surfaces. 3 years had passed since she left Venezuela, her master's degree in gerontology, collecting dust in a drawer while she worked minimum wage to save money for her 8-year-old son, Miguel's immigration process. The diner's ancient air conditioning unit wheezed overhead, barely cutting through the 108-degree heat. Through the streaked windows, Phoenix's downtown bustled with the usual lunch crowd. Isabella's eyes drifted to the framed photo in her apron. Pocket. Miguel's gap-toothed smile frozen in time. The last time she'd held him, he was 5. Now their only connection was through weekly video calls where she promised, "Soon, mi amor," while trying to hide her tears. "Isabella, table 6 needs coffee," her manager barked, snapping her back to reality. As she reached for the coffee pot, movement outside caught her attention. Through the heat waves rising from the pavement, she spotted an elderly man in a tweed jacket, completely inappropriate for the weather, stumbling near the crosswalk. His silver hair was disheveled, and his face showed clear signs of confusion and distress. What happened next would change her life forever, though at that moment, all she saw was someone who needed help. Without hesitation, she set down the coffee pot, her heart racing as she watched a group of teenagers approach the man, phones raised and laughing. "Hey, look at this old dude," one teenager shouted, pointing his phone at the confused senior. Harold Thompson, though Isabella didn't know his name yet, swayed unsteadily on his feet, muttering about a classroom he needed to find. His normally sharp blue eyes were glazed with confusion, his distinguished features twisted in distress. Isabella burst through the diner's door, ignoring her manager's shouts about her break not starting for another hour. The heat hit her like a wall as she rushed toward the scene. "Sir, you need help?" she called out in her accented English, pushing past the teenagers who were now live-streaming the old man's confusion. I need to get to my lecture," Harold mumbled, his voice cracking. "The students are waiting. It's on Maple Street." Sweat soaked through his tweed jacket, and his face had turned an alarming shade of red. Isabella turned to the laughing teens. "Stop! Have respect!" she commanded, her voice firm despite her limited English. They backed away, but their phones kept recording. Harold gripped her arm, his hand trembling. "Young lady, I can't quite remember." As he swayed dangerously, Isabella caught him before he could fall. The heat was overwhelming, and she knew she had to act fast. This man needed help, and despite the risk of losing her job, despite the stares from passers-by, despite everything, she wouldn't walk away. Isabella guided Harold to a nearby bench, shielding him from the relentless sun. "Sir, where you live?" she asked gently. Harold's brow furrowed, his eyes darting around in confusion. I'm not sure. There was a house on Maple Street, but that was years ago." Determined to help, Isabella approached a boutique across the street. The bell chimed as she entered, the cool air a stark contrast to the suffocating heat outside. "Please, I need help. There's a man—" The store clerk cut her off with a dismissive wave. "We don't need any trouble here, take it outside." Undeterred, Isabella tried the next store and the next. Each time, she was met with suspicion or indifference. Even the police officer on the corner eyed her warily. "Ma'am, I suggest you move along. We don't need any disturbances." The implication was clear. In her waitress uniform, with her accent and her brown skin, Isabella wasn't seen as someone trying to help. She was seen as a potential threat. Returning to Harold, she found him slumped on the bench, his breathing labored. "It's okay, Signor," she soothed, though her own heart raced with worry. "We will find your home." As the afternoon wore on, Isabella's options dwindled. Her phone buzzed incessantly, her manager demanding she return or lose her job. But one look at Harold's vulnerable state steeled her resolve. With trembling hands, she reached for Harold's jacket pocket, praying to find some identification. Her fingers closed around a worn leather wallet. Inside, she found an address, not on Maple Street, but across town. Isabella hesitated, her hand hovering over the Uber app on her phone. The fare would cost nearly half of what she'd saved for Miguel's immigration fees this month. Every penny was precious, earmarked for reuniting with her son. Harold stirred, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. In that moment, Isabella made her decision. As the Uber pulled up, she helped Harold into the back seat, her heart pounding. The driver eyed them suspiciously in the rearview mirror. "You sure about this, lady?" Isabella nodded, her voice steadier. Then she felt, "Yes, this man needs help and I will help him." As they pulled away from the curb, Isabella clutched her phone, staring at the photo of Miguel. "Lo siento, mi amor," she whispered. "Mama will find another way." The car merged into traffic, carrying them towards an uncertain destination and a future neither of them could have imagined. The Uber pulled up to a stately colonial home in an upscale Phoenix suburb. Isabella helped Harold out of the car, her heart racing as she approached the front door. Before she could knock, it swung open, revealing a middle-aged couple with worry etched on their faces. "Dad!" the man exclaimed, rushing to Harold's side. His relief quickly turned to suspicion. As he eyed Isabella, "Who are you? What's going on?" Isabella tried to explain, her words tumbling out in a mix of English and Spanish. "I found him downtown, confused. He needed help." "Richard, call the police," the woman interrupted, her voice sharp with accusation. "How do we know she didn't take advantage of him?" Isabella felt her world crumbling. "No, please," she pleaded. "I only wanted to help. I used my own money to bring him home." Richard, Harold's son, held up a hand to silence her. "We'll sort this out inside. Karen, help." "Dad, to his room." He turned to Isabella, his gaze cold. "You're not going anywhere until we get to the bottom of this." As they entered the house, Isabella caught sight of herself in a hallway mirror. Disheveled, still in her waitress uniform, looking every bit the outsider in this pristine home. She squared her shoulders, determined to stand her ground. She had done nothing wrong. Inside, the tension was palpable. Karen paced the living room, phone in hand, while Richard interrogated Isabella. "How do we know you didn't steal anything? Why would you spend your own money on a stranger?" Just as Isabella opened her mouth to defend herself, Harold's voice rang out from the doorway. "She saved me." All eyes turned to the elderly man, now looking more lucid. "This young lady protected me when no one else would." Richard's expression softened slightly, but doubt lingered. "Dad, are you sure? You've been confused lately." "I may forget things," Harold said firmly, "but I know kindness when I see it." Karen, still skeptical, turned on the local news. To everyone's surprise, there was footage of the incident downtown, captured by the teenager's livestream. The video showed Isabella defending Harold, trying to get help, and finally calling the Uber. The room fell silent as the truth unfolded on screen. Isabella watched, tears welling in her eyes as her actions were broadcast for all to see. She hadn't sought recognition. She had simply followed her heart. Richard turned to her, his face a mix of shame and gratitude. We owe you an apology. Thank you for helping our father." Isabella nodded, relief washing over her. As the tension dissipated, Harold took her hand. "Tell us your story, my dear. I have a feeling it's just beginning." The Thompson family gathered around their dining table, the mood shifting from suspicion to curiosity. Isabella sat nervously, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "So, Isabella," Richard began, his tone softer now, "tell us about yourself." Taking a deep breath, Isabella shared her story. She spoke of her life in Venezuela, her master's degree in gerontology, and the economic crisis that forced her to leave. Her voice cracked as she mentioned Miguel, her 8-year-old son, still living with relatives back home. "I work at Diner, save every penny," she explained, "for Miguel's visa, for a better life." Karen, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "You have a degree in elder care, but you're working as a waitress." Isabella nodded sadly. "My diploma, it's not recognized here, but I do what I must for my son." Harold, who had been dozing in his armchair, suddenly perked up. "Richard, isn't your medical center always short on qualified caregivers?" Richard's eyes widened with realization. He turned to Isabella, seeing her in a new light. "We've been trying to expand our geriatric care unit. Someone with your background, especially with bilingual skills, it could be invaluable." Isabella hardly dared to hope. You mean a job in my field? For the first time that day, genuine smiles spread across the room. The seeds of opportunity had been planted. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Isabella. Richard, true to his word, offered her a position at his medical center. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to use her education to make a difference. The Thompsons didn't stop there. They helped Isabella navigate the complex process of getting her Venezuelan credentials recognized in the US. Karen, who had connections in immigration law, began looking into expediting Miguel's visa process. Isabella threw herself into her new role, her natural compassion and expertise shining through. She implemented a culturally sensitive care program, bridging gaps for elderly patients from diverse backgrounds. Harold became her biggest cheerleader, insisting on having her as his primary caregiver. Their bond grew, transcending language barriers. He'd regale her with stories from his teaching days, while she taught him Spanish phrases. One evening, as Isabella was preparing to leave after her shift, Richard called her into his office. "Isabella, I have some news," he said, his expression unreadable. Her heart raced. Had she done something wrong? Was this all too good to be true? Richard broke into a wide grin. "We just got word from the immigration office. Miguel's visa has been approved. You can bring your son home." Isabella's world stopped. Tears streamed down her face as the realization hit her. After years of sacrifice, of lonely nights and endless worries, her dream was finally coming true. As she left the office that night, the Phoenix sky blazed with colors of sunset. For Isabella, it wasn't just the end of a day, it was the dawn of a new life. The news of Miguel's impending arrival spread quickly through the medical center. Isabella's colleagues, once distant, now rallied around her, offering furniture, clothes, and toys for her son. The community she had quietly served for years was finally seeing her, not as an immigrant, but as a devoted mother and skilled professional. Harold insisted on accompanying Isabella to the airport to welcome Miguel. As they waited at the arrival gate, he squeezed her hand. "You've changed more than just your own life, my dear," he said softly. "You've changed all of ours." The moment Miguel emerged, suitcase dragging behind him, time stood still. Isabella fell to her knees, embracing her son for the first time in 3 years. Tears flowed freely as they held each other, years of separation melting away in an instant. "Mama," Miguel whispered, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I missed you so much." As they drove home, Miguel's eyes wide with wonder at the Arizona landscape, Isabella caught Harold's gaze in the rearview mirror. His eyes twinkled with joy, reflecting the profound impact of one simple act of kindness. 1 year later, Isabella stood before a crowd at the grand opening of the Thompson Medical Center's new multicultural geriatric care wing. Richard beamed with pride as he introduced her as the program director. "A year ago," Isabella began, her accent now tinged with confidence, "I was a stranger in this city, struggling to find my place. Today I stand before you not just as a professional, but as a testament to the power of compassion and community." She glanced at Miguel, now thriving in his new school, sitting beside Karen, who had become like a grandmother to him. Harold, in his wheelchair but sharp as ever, gave her a thumbs up. "This center," Isabella continued, "is more than a medical facility. It's a bridge between cultures, a place where every patient, regardless of their background, can find comfort and understanding in their golden years." As she cut the ribbon, cheers erupted. The mayor, present for the ceremony, announced a new city initiative inspired by Isabella's story, a program to help skilled immigrants transition into their professional fields. Later that evening, as Isabella tucked Miguel into bed, he asked, "Mama, are you happy here?" She smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Sí, mi amor, this is home now." Downstairs, she found a surprise gathering. The Thompsons, her colleagues, and even the owner of Sunny's Diner. They raised their glasses in a toast. "To Isabella," Harold proclaimed, "the guardian angel of Phoenix. May we all learn to see the humanity in every stranger we meet." As laughter and conversation filled the room, Isabella realized that her act of kindness hadn't just changed her life. It had created a ripple effect touching countless others. In helping one lost soul find his way home, she had found her own place in the world. The phoenix sun set outside, painting the sky in brilliant hues. For Isabella, it was more than a beautiful view. It was a promise of brighter tomorrows, not just for her family, but for a community forever changed by the power of one person's compassion.